Well, good afternoon. I see a lot of familiar names and faces already here. Welcome to this special Florida-wide Zoom meeting. How exciting is that? And YouTube Live, so hello, YouTube. And we have a special guest today, Andrew Seidel of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Before we get started, I would like to thank a lot of the organizations, I mean, if not all the organizations who are hosting us today, and we have so many. The First Coast Free Thought Society, Florida Humanist Association, the Humanists of West Florida, the Satanic Temple, the Central Florida chapter, the Atheists of Florida, the Suncoast Skeptics, Free Flow, the Free Thought Florida Conference, the Tallahassee Atheists, Humanists of Tallahassee, the Atheist Community of Polk County, the Humanist Community of the Space Coast, and Flash, the Florida Atheists and Secular Humanists. In other words, the whole state has gotten here to hear Andrew, which is awesome. So if you've joined us today in Florida and you're not a part of a local group that has an interest in the separation of religion and government, you can find all about groups that are going on across the state at tinyurl.com/FL Again, that's all together, FL Freethought. So tinyurl.com/FL There are dozens of different groups across the state. So I encourage anyone, if you're not already in a group, to find one near you. We are live on Zoom. We are live streaming to YouTube. Those of you in Zoom today, hopefully you're going to easily find the chat option available at the bottom of your screen on your computer. If you're on a mobile device, just tap the screen and it should appear as an option. Chat is where we need you to ask questions today. So put those there. And if you want to be sure that I see them, you can direct them to me specifically or write the word question in caps right before it. And I'll try to put those together for Andrew to answer at the end of the talk. You can also raise your hand. We may be doing some, allowing people to ask live questions that way, but you may get cut off if you don't get to your question quickly. So I'm just giving you a heads up on that. So a little bit about Andrew. Andrew is a constitutional attorney, the director of strategic response at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and an author. I have his book actually right here. Andrew graduated cum laude from Tulane University with a BS in neuroscience and environmental science, magna cum laude from Tulane Law School. He was awarded the Herbert J. McCarthy Award for Excellence in Environmental Law. He studied human rights and international law at the University of Amsterdam, traveled the world on a semester at sea. Andrew completed his Master of Law at Denver University Sturm College of Law with a perfect GPA and was awarded the Outstanding LLM Award. His first book was published last year. For many years, we've been blessed with his services as a designated attorney on the FFRF staff for Florida issues. His butt, I've heard, actually has its own Twitter page. I recently learned that, which I thought was interesting. And I think it actually has 53 followers. So that's just, if you want to add to that on Twitter, please be aware. And so we're super excited to have Andrew with us. How are things going up there in Madison?
Lovely. Thank you so much for that warm introduction and for hosting me. It's really great to see so many friendly faces and names. I saw Mark and Keith and Choice and Lenice and obviously David and Jocelyn. So thank you so much for hosting me and for joining me in my home here in Wisconsin. Welcome.
Thank you for having us. I think you're going to be giving us a presentation. So the way today is going to be kind of running is I'm going to hand this over to Andrew. He's going to present for a while, and then we're going to do some conversation and questions and have a lot of fun here for the second half. So take it away, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. Secular America has a problem. And the problem is, it's simple. Who cares, right? Who cares about upholding the purity of a constitutional principle? Who cares about legal and logical consistency? So the way this manifests is when FFRF stops one of the thousands of constitutional violations that come our way each year, you hear it in the cries from the other side, right? Look, this isn't hurting anyone. You're not forced to do anything. Hey, even if this is technically a violation, there's nothing wrong with it. And sometimes you don't just hear those from the other side, you hear them from our side as well. Now, lawyers like myself who rely on precedent to make their legal case are guilty and may even exacerbate the problem with explanations that are overly legal, right? We'll say you're violating the Constitution, or you can't put the 10 Commandments up on that classroom wall because the Supreme Court said so in Stone versus Graham. Not maybe the most persuasive case for the average person. So what I want to get into today is who cares? Not many people, not enough people. Put another way, why matters? Why protect the separation of state and church? What's in it for you? What's in it for your Christian neighbors, for the religious majority? Now, from January 1st, 2016 until the end of 2019, FFRF went 14-2 in our cases in court. We were good in court, very good. But we really need to win the hearts and minds of our neighbors. And let's face it, the arguments we make can be pretty unpopular. So today, this evening, I wanted to get back to basics. I wanted to get elemental. I want us to come away from this discussion tonight with a better understanding of why this fight, the fight to defend the wall of separation between state and church, the fight to which I have dedicated my career, is so important. I want us to be able to explain it to our kids, to our friends, to our neighbors, to those MAGA family members that we have to put up with at holidays and birthdays when we can actually get together. Every one of us should be able to persuasively articulate why the separation of state and church exists in the first place, why we still need it, and why we must defend it. If you have been paying attention to the news over the past month, or really over the past few years, 3 years, we might say, one thing should be clear. We need public education about why the strict separation between state and church is so critical. If we want to make our case, not just in the court of law, but in the court of public opinion, we need to be able to grasp, and more importantly, to communicate the why, because why matters. And it may matter now than ever before, because we are in real danger of losing that wall to this Supreme Court. So first of all, where are we? Just a teensy bit of history here. At FFRF, we like to say that the only wall that we need is the wall separating state and church. And the wall of separation is an American original. The idea was floating around in the Enlightenment, but it was first implemented in the American experiment. Until then, no other nation had sought to protect the ability of its citizens to think freely by separating government from religion and religion from government. Right? It's embodied right there in the first 3 words of the Constitution: we, the people. Those words are poetic, but they're also so much more. They declare that power comes from the people, not God's, that the source of rulers' authority comes not from above, but from below, from the masses. Instead of a higher authority delegating down to a chosen monarch, the people who are governed willingly choose to cede some of their autonomy to live a better life together as a country. So that was really revolutionary. It's also a declaration that almost by definition excludes religion from the government. So America invented the separation of state and church. And I, for one, am very proud of this fact. I also don't think an appeal to patriotism can go wrong when we are trying to win the hearts of some of our fellow citizens. But why did the founders design a secular government for the American experiment? And I cover that in greater detail in The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American, which Jocelyn so kindly held up at the beginning of the talk there. There's one phrase, though, that really has always jumped out at me from the founding generation, and that's torrents of blood. Torrents of blood. James Madison wrote that, and he was looking at the torrents of blood that were spilled in the name of religion, especially in what they called the Old World. Jefferson looked at this too. So did most of the other founders at the time. And so in The Founding Myth, I write that after surveying that bloody history, the founders decided to build this wall that would forever separate state and church. They disestablished religion and abolished religious tests for public office. They invented the secular state. And the problem that we face today is that history is very distant. It's gone. We can't relate to it, but it was the result of centuries, millennia really, of oppression by religion blended with our government. And we shouldn't spurn those lessons. Because our forefathers absorbed those lessons, I think we have a certain amount of complacency. and no real understanding that those provisions protect religious freedom. In a way, we are victims of our own success. So, unfortunately, while this is a very good reason, torrents of blood being spilled to reach religious conformity, that's a great reason to support state church separation. That history isn't fresh. So, it's not going to be persuasive today. So, I took the time and have been taking the time for a while to try to pin down the things that I think are going to be persuasive to the average person. And I boiled it down to 5 basic things: unity, equality, liberty. This is better for religion, and religious freedom. And these are all intimately linked. They're not discrete categories, but I do want to touch on each one today. So unity, equality, liberty. It's better for a religion and religious freedom. Now, let's talk about unity first. I'm not sure you've all heard this, but our country is slightly divided today. And religion is not a unifying force. It is a divisive force. Honestly, it's the most divisive force that we know of. Religion claims to know ultimate truths on the basis of faith. In its most divisive form, religion claims to be absolutely certain about those ultimate truths, while simultaneously admitting that faith, not evidence, is required to hold that belief. And that is a recipe for discord and disunity and division. And this is an excellent reason for keeping religion out of our government. Our nation is a union of different people and of different states. We are diverse enough. We don't need religion to divide us even further. And this is one reason that I'm so opposed to the amended Pledge of Allegiance, adding under God, to edit that literally uses religion to divide that which is meant to be indivisible. And pride in American diversity was enshrined in our de facto original, not Johnny come lately, original motto, e pluribus unum: from many, one; from many people, one nation; from many colonies, one country. That became an American ideal. Unity through diversity is a strength. Unity with religious division is impossible. So unity is number one. And it's not just unity, but also equality. Without a strict separation of state and church, which religion is going to be favored? Odds are it's not going to be yours. Is it going to be Christianity? Okay, well then which branch? Is it going to be the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Catholics, who got almost $2 billion in taxpayer money in the PPP program, evangelicals, the Christian Scientists? Right? The only solution is that the government remain absolutely neutral on religion and religious issues. None are favored, none are persecuted, all are equal. And you will hear a very popular counter argument here that government neutrality favors atheism. By forcing religion out of the government, you are necessarily promoting atheism. And I like to use an example here to explain why that's nonsense. So I decided to use one from my copious experience with David and Jocelyn dealing with violations in Florida schools. And this is one that we had all the time, especially in Orange County, say. So just imagine a football coach at a public school. Well, let's just say it at Orange County Public High School. He's a government employee, so he has to be neutral about religion. Now, if the coach has the kids huddle up and he tells them to accept Jesus as their savior and then leads them in prayer, he's not being neutral. He's promoting Christianity. We see this all the time, and it's unconstitutional. Now, imagine that the coach has the kids huddle up and tells them that there is no God and that church and prayer are pointless and they should stop with all that nonsense. Okay. Then the coach is promoting atheism. I have yet to see a legitimate case of this happening, despite the alarmist outlets that are willing to bend the facts to fit that narrative. If it did happen, though, the coach would be promoting atheism and would be violating the Constitution. Now, third example, imagine that this coach has the kids huddle up and tells them, go out there and run the option or the hitch and go or the cover two, or just go out there and play your best. right? That is a coach who is being neutral about religion. That's a coach who's doing his job and being neutral about religion. A secular government is not a government that promotes religion or atheism. It's a neutral government. This is the best solution. It's really the only solution. It favors no one, includes everyone, unites us all under a legitimate government purpose, and it doesn't risk coercing people into a certain belief. There's no risk of that at all. Okay, so unity, equality, liberty. Liberty. This one, I chose liberty rather than freedom for a reason that I think will be made clear. So politicians occupy an office, and that office is given certain powers, and it's prohibited from doing anything else. So technically, I hesitate to use this because, especially with some of the things that the president did over the last 24 hours, you can't use an office to promote your personal business or enrich yourself. Okay. You can't use an office to fundraise for your campaign. You can't sell the office. That is, you can't agree to, for instance, pass certain laws in return for money, right? You can't use the power of an office to pressure others into giving sexual favors. You can't exercise undue influence. At least this is the way the rules used to be and the norms that we care for and the way it should be, right? And promoting religion, foisting religion on citizens, abusing a public office to promote a personal religion is outside the power of the government too. Our government simply does not have the power to promote religion. In the words of Alexander Hamilton, A.Ham, our government has, quote, no particle of spiritual jurisdiction. He wrote that in the Federalist Papers, which, as we all know, he wrote most of. We need to start speaking of theocrats as abusing an office that belongs to us, to we the people, right? To promote their personal religion. It's an abusive office to promote their personal religion. This is an argument for a limited government, which has a broader appeal and maybe an appeal to people who would otherwise not be our allies on these kinds of issues. Okay. Fourth one, this is better for religion. So though non-religious Americans, we nuns, are the fastest growing demographic, most Americans are still religious, and we need reasons why state-church separation is important to them. Not just important, but better for them. And James Madison, I think, put this very nicely and in a way that I think many believers can understand, especially given the last 3 years. He said that, quote, religion and government will both exist in greater purity the less they are mixed together. If religion wants to get involved in the government is going to get involved in religion. There is no such thing as a one-way wall. So if religion depends on the government for money, the government's going to dictate the terms of that funding and how religion can spend it. You want money for your soup kitchen? Fine. You can't discriminate in who you hire or who you serve. You can't have prayers when you're providing meals with our money. And we are seeing this clash very, very raw, and it's happening right now. And it's because of a lot of the things the Supreme Court has decided over the past really month. This is going to come to a head, I promise you. Anybody know? Well, I won't ask because it's harder to ask in person, but one of the reasons why courts have upheld "In God We Trust" as the national motto is because it has lost its religious significance. It's basically a de minimis violation. But a de minimis violation minimizes religion. So, they imagine if a court had said that John 3:16 or that praying the rosary had lost all religious significance because they've been repeated so often. That's what they're saying with the phrase "In God We Trust." And this is actually, there's a very useful worldly example here too. Has anybody ever noticed that England, with its established church, is far less religious than America? And, a lot of people think that this is this great paradox, but this is actually precisely what we should expect to see. In a country with an established church, that church has a monopoly with no competitors and taxes supporting the church. The priests grow fat and indolent, and they feel entitled to their flock. They can be successful without any effort whatsoever. In countries with secular governments and protections for the freedom of worship, the religious marketplace becomes a jungle. If a church gets lazy or a preacher feels entitled, their flock can just go across the street and worship somewhere else. So the jungle-like market ensures that religions which are best at attracting and keeping members survive. So Adam Smith, writing in 1776, actually predicted that a nation with a secular government would be more religious. James Madison predicted it as well. So state-church separation actually guarantees that religion is going to thrive, which seems counterintuitive to most people. But again, that's what we'd expect to see. So the fifth one is religious freedom. State-church separation also guarantees that religious freedom will thrive. And I know you've probably all heard me say this before, but there is no freedom of religion without a government that is free from religion. There is no freedom of religion without a government that is free from religion. If you only take away one thing from this talk, let it be that phrase. It is, I've found, the most useful thing when trying to talk to people about how this is important. True religious freedom can only exist when we divorce the awesome power that religion holds over this supposed afterlife from the power the government has over your everyday life. Until then, the true freedom of thought and even the freedom of religion cannot exist. It's not possible. A secular government is a prerequisite for genuine religious freedom. And it is crucially important for us to understand where the religious freedom right lies, because right now there is a gross attempt to redefine and weaponize that right, weaponize religious freedom, to turn it into a right to use the government to promote your religion, to use taxes to fund your religion, to exempt yourself from every law that you think that conflicts with what you think your God says. And I mean, I could give a whole nother talk on this topic. I'm writing a book in the back of my brain on this topic right now, but it's important for you when talking with people to be able to make this distinction. And we lost a big chunk of this battle at the Supreme Court over this last month. We fought to show that one of the critical religious freedom rights lies in the Espinoza case, which is, we'll probably get into it in Q&A a little bit. The court handed this case down on July 1st. And we tried to show the court where the religious right in that case lies, but it ignored us. The court was deciding whether or not the government could tax citizens and then turn around and give that money to Christian schools. And the religious freedom right in that case does not lie with the 3 Christian parents who brought that case, but with every single taxpayer. The right at issue guarantees that the coercive taxing power of the government may not be wielded to oblige Muslims to bankroll temples and yeshivas, or to compel Jews to subsidize Christian churches and Catholic schools, or to force Christians to fund mosques and madrasas, or to force non-believers to support any of those. That is the right that was at issue, and the court blew it. Every American has a right based in religious liberty to not fund and support a government that aligns itself with one religion over another, or with religion over non-religion. That is the greatest threat to religious liberty, and it is neutralized by a secular government. So, those are the 5 reasons that every American should support the separation of state and church, right? Unity, equality, liberty. It's better for religion and religious freedom. And let me just add one more that I think it's more effective for progressive friends and families. So Florida, I don't know how much this will be useful for you, but whatever issues you care about, limiting the power of religion in our government, ending the sense of Christian entitlement in this country is virtually a panacea. Do you want better education? Do you want full funding for public schools instead of vouchers for private religious schools? Do you want accurate science about evolution and sex taught in our classrooms? Do you want full civil and political rights for LGBTQ citizens, for women, for minorities? Do you want reproductive justice and choice to be fully realized? Do you want a greener world and a healthier environment? Do you want America to get serious about global climate change and shun its deniers? Do you want better and access to universal health care? Do you want scientific research to be guided by scientists? Do you want to solve those problems in the Middle East? Do you want a response to pandemic to be guided by science and not wishful thinking? End Christian nationalism, end religious encroachments into government power, and we will see progress on every one of those issues. And finally, I know there's a lot of bad news right now. The pandemic, the rampant racism, an activist Supreme Court trying to destroy some of our most cherished rights, including our right to a secular government. It's hard to find good news, but I do have hope. I really do. And this is why. American Christianity is on its way out. Christian nationalists read the same Pew headlines that we do. They look out, or when they're meeting in violation of stay-at-home orders, they look out and they see empty pews. They don't see smiling faces staring back at them. And most people aren't wearing masks and those things anyway, so it's not that. It's because people are fleeing. They can read the demographic studies as well as we can, right? And right now, Christian nationalists are raging against the dying of their privilege. They are doing massive, massive damage, including these judges. But we are still at a point where we can recover. And in fact, in a way, that damage has shown us where we needed change the most. It's a silver lining in a way. They've shown a light on the areas that were ignored before, but are crucially needed change. And we can focus on those again soon. So as America nears the tipping point at which Christianity's power and privilege are reduced to equality, right? They're gonna fight more and more and more. They are not going to go gently into the obsolescence for which they are bound. But the end of Christian privilege is near. We are seeing the death throes of this divisive, hostile, un-American political theology. And I, for one, truly welcome that future. And that puts us at about a half hour. So I want to now hear from you and talk to you about the questions you have and see how I can help you fight for that very future right now.
Thank you, Andrew. That's a lot. That's a lot to talk about.
We're just going to solve all the world's problems.
We are. Apparently, between unity, equality, liberty, better for religion and religious freedom, we will have it figured out. Mm-hmm. I have to say, I think unity really appealed to me as I was listening when it comes to having the argument with, or should I say discussion with someone who is what I consider Christian light, but they say, oh, it's a Christian country. I think unity for me in a lot of conversations would be the most impactful from just they don't know history. We're not going to get into the logistics of who wrote what. Yeah. A lot of people are in that place. And I think personally, my observation of the increase of rights for women, the fact that we've had all these Black Lives Matter protests that I'm so proud of that has been happening, to me demonstrates that some Americans at least will start standing up for other people, and that's how it should be. Anyway, this isn't about me. So I will let's go with the softball question. I'm going to go off topic a little bit and say, what are your thoughts on the musical Hamilton and its accuracy or inaccuracy with respect to Christian founding myth?
I love it. Liz, my wife, took me to it as a surprise in Chicago when it was playing up. That's close to us. I had no idea it was for my birthday one year. I had no idea we were going. I thought we were going to Chicago for whatever, a fun night out on the town. And we saw Hamilton, and Wayne Brady played Aaron Burr and just killed it. And I love it. And I don't turn to Broadway or musicals for historical accuracy. I turn to them for entertainment. And, to me, I mean, Alexander Hamilton was probably one of the more devout founding fathers in a way. But I don't like to get into, and you read more about this in the founding myth. When we're having these debates, I don't think, and we're talking, especially when we're talking about separation of state and church, I don't think it's worth burning the effort to talk about what the founding fathers personally believed. And I think in a way it's beside the point, because it's sort of, it seeds ground. Once you start having the discussion, you're saying that the outcome of that discussion is important. And if you want to talk about what the founding fathers beliefs that were important are, let's talk about their beliefs about religion and the government. That's the thing. And we know they chose to separate state and church. We know they banned religious tests for public office. They were the first to leave God out of the Constitution. They put the power, said that the power came from we the people. They invented the separation of state and church. Let's talk about those ideas rather than what they personally believed about God. That's the better conversation to have. And it's going to get us a lot farther along in what we want. But I love Hamilton. Listen to the soundtrack all the time. Listens to it when I get fired up for debates and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely love it. Adore it.
Okay, thank you. I thought that'd be fun. Anyway,
Yeah.
I hopefully everyone's enjoying it if you have access to viewing it right now. There was a question put forth. Can you distinguish Justice Kagan's position in Trinity compared to Espinoza?
Yeah. So for everybody who doesn't know, a few years ago, the Supreme Court decided a case called Trinity Lutheran. And essentially, a church wanted access to a government grant program that would allow it to resurface its playground with rubberized, get rid of that gravel and put those cool rubber surfaces underneath all the equipment so kids don't skin their knees. And the state had a constitutional provision said churches can't apply. Churches can't get any type of financial aid from the government. So Missouri said, "Oh, you can't apply for this." Never mind that they later changed their mind on that, and this case should never have even been decided by the Supreme Court. And Justice Kagan joined the conservative justices and Justice Breyer for a 7-2 decision, saying, "Yeah, the church had a right to ask for this money because it was going towards something that was entirely secular." Right? The surface of the playground didn't have anything to do with the religion of the church or promoting religion. Now, there was a fiction in there because the church said that the playground was part of the school, which it labeled as a ministry. Okay, so there's a fiction that sort of everybody agreed to in there, except for Justices Sotomayor and Ginsburg, who dissented in that case. And then the second case that question involves is Espinoza, which was decided just a couple of weeks ago, July 1st, in which the Supreme Court decided that there was a Montana similar provision in its constitution: no aid, indirect or direct, goes to government, or goes for religious purposes, including religious schools. And this time 5 justices said, yeah, you have to let Christian schools and Christian parents at that money. And this time it was the 5 conservative justices, Breyer and Kagan, did not join them. And Breyer and Kagan would tell you that the difference is the first case involved a secular use for those funds, right? That it was just going for this playground resurfacing. It was just to stop kids from getting skinned knees. And in the second case, it was going towards religious education. And the parents admitted that one of the reasons they were seeking religious education is because they wanted to teach their kids Christian values. So that's a religious purpose. So they would argue that they're talking about the purpose of the funding, a secular purpose versus a religious purpose. I don't think that holds up under really any scrutiny, partly for some of the reasons I've already said. I think Breyer and Kagan prefer to decide cases like this on a case-by-case basis rather than deciding it on the broad legal principles. And we've seen a lot of problems because of that. But they've also joined those conservative justices on other cases, like on the Big Cross case that American Humanist Association brought that was decided last term. They joined the conservatives on that case. It's not the only 7-2 decision we've seen recently. There are quite a few, actually. I won't rehash them all, but that would be the basic reason they went that way here.
Okay,
They would say.
thank you. I don't have any further questions specifically about that. I personally read recently in the news that the U.S. Roman Catholic Church got a special and unprecedented exemption from federal rules, and they've gotten about $1.4 billion in taxpayer-backed coronavirus aid, with millions going to dioceses. They've paid huge settlements, or they sought bankruptcy protection, things like that. Can you speculate on the chances of SCOTUS finding that COVID bailout to churches unconstitutional? If so, could the funds be recovered? Is there a better chance?
There's no chance that the Supreme Court does the right thing in this case. I mean, first of all, 4 of the conservative members on the court are Catholic. Gorsuch, the 5th conservative member of the court, was brought up Catholic, though he considers himself Episcopalian now. But the bigger problem is that they just decided this Espinoza case, which suggests that when there's a government program that is meant to be open to anyone, it's discrimination to exclude religion from that. Essentially, if you want to read it like broadly and scarily, which I think is acceptable to do, what the Supreme Court decided in Espinoza is that state-church separation is discrimination. So there's very little likelihood that this court would say that the Catholic Church getting funds was somehow wrong under the separation of state and church. They would instead say that excluding churches from this program would have been unconstitutional.
But couldn't we on the other side say, okay, great, you got the money, you're using it to help people, whatever, but now you need to disclose your financials, because we ask other nonprofits to disclose their financials when they get money. So we think you guys should do it. Is there any chance for that to happen?
Yes, that's a very astute question. That's one of the things that the Freedom from Religion Foundation has been working on since late March. We've been pounding the pavement virtually on Capitol Hill, talking to legislators about this, pointing this out as a problem, saying that, look, churches don't file any financial paperwork or disclosures with the IRS, and certainly not the way every other nonprofit in the country does. We have no idea what they're going to use this money for. We have no idea what they're going to be spending it on. And I mean, this is a violation. Is just it's monstrous. And the Freedom from Religion Foundation, we've been working on it since late March. I feel like for a very long time I was this lone voice screaming into the wilderness about how this was a big violation. And I'm so thrilled that when the data came out, now everybody is talking about it. I just wish they had done it a little bit sooner too. I mean, as soon as the data came out, I started going through it and looking at some of the big grants. So the data that was released showed you blocks of funds. So like 150,000 to 300,000, 300,000 to 1 million. So you don't know the exact amount that each of these churches got. You know that it fell into a range. And I was looking in the $2 to $5 million range for these churches, and the Diocese of Pittsburgh got $2 to $5 million. And that jumped out at me because about 20 months ago, I was spending a lot of time reading the Pennsylvania grand jury report on abuse of the priests in the Catholic Church in Pennsylvania. And this made the news. It was national news. It was a big deal when it happened. People probably remember a little bit of it. I read the entire report, so I remember a lot more of it than the average person. And the Diocese of Pittsburgh particularly stuck in my mind because it had 90 priests that were credibly accused of raping, torturing, abusing children, and then covering it up. If you don't remember, the diocese had a 7-step playbook for covering up these violations.
So we've given them a bunch of money.
We gave them between $2 and $5 million. And the Diocese of Pittsburgh, the priests marked easy victims by giving them gold crosses to carry around so that other priests would know who they could assault and rape. Okay. And we gave that organization between $2 and $5 million. And we're also talking about this as though the Catholic Church, individual churches are completely different. This is an organization that has its own bank, that has its own country, that has a priceless collection of art. It does not need to be taking almost $2 billion in taxpayer money. This is just, to me, this is a scandal. It's hard to say unlike any we've ever seen in the last 3 years, but this is a huge scandal. And it's not just this church, but some of the churches most closely tied to Donald Trump, to his Evangelical Advisory Board, also got between $2 and $5 million. Robert Jefferson, who's always on Fox News defending Trump, took in between $2 and $5 million of your money.
I'm not surprised by that last comment. It just doesn't, not at all fazed by that, because I just almost expect it, given the vice president.
Who was at Robert Jefferson's church 2 weeks ago.
Very, very not surprised, but anyway, so that's, yeah, okay, that's dark. There's a question that was posted. Why don't we tax religious organizations? I think that kind of ties to what we're talking about. What's the actual reason we don't tax them?
Yeah, good question. Follow up too, for sure. And because the Supreme Court has said that if the government extends a benefit to all organizations that are charitable, so secular and religious, that it's okay. So somebody challenged the tax exemption of churches a while back, and in a case called Walls versus Tax Commissioner, the Supreme Court said, no, because you're extending this to everybody, it's just a question of equality, so it's okay. The key thing for us to understand is that so far the court has not said that tax exemption is a right that religious entities have. So far the court has only been willing to say that it's a privilege that religious entities have, and it's a privilege that they get because it's been extended to other secular organizations as well. So theoretically, we could reach out and take some of that back. But I would urge everybody to stop spending time and bandwidth thinking about that, and instead think about the question that Jocelyn just asked before that, which is, okay, well, how can we get at the church's financials? Because that's the first step in any of this. Right now, churches file no financial paperwork with the IRS. We have no idea. They're just black holes when it comes to this. That makes them susceptible to fraud and abuse, and we've seen that time and time again. But it also makes them susceptible to crime, and like money launderers we know use churches from time to time because they don't file any of this information with the IRS. And one of the things, again, we're doing with this PPP program, and we're going to be arguing, and we actually pointed this out to the Supreme Court, that look, if you're going to give public money to churches, public accountability is going to follow. And so I think that is absolutely something. If you right now are feeling angry and pissed and you want to do something about this, write some letters to your representatives and your senators. Don't say tax the churches. Say make the churches file financial paperwork with the IRS like every other organization out there. They do not have a right in the First Amendment, certainly, to keep that information private.
Are there any, and this is just because I'm listening to you talk about this, are there actually any religious organizations that have indicated they would be open to this?
No. There's the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, ECFA, ECFA. And it is a voluntary organization that some evangelical churches belong to. And they do ask that churches do certain things to make themselves more accountable to their donors. But it's all voluntary. It's not well enforced, and it's not useful. And when Congress has looked at this many times, looked at forcing churches to file Form 990s and things like that. And every time the churches kind of rose up against that and beaten it down, including the most recent time was Senator Grassley looked into this in 2011 and 2012 and released a report that I wrote a very long white paper on for FFRF to send to him, 17 different issues. It was a whole thing, including a lot of the stuff that we have just been talking about. But this, to me, is where we ought to be putting our resources, and it's certainly one area that FFRF is putting a ton of resources in right now. It's what our lobbyists on Capitol Hill are working on.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you guys are out there doing that. That's awesome. And hopefully everyone who's listening to this right now will remember that the FFRF needs your support because we want you guys out there doing that.
Please.
So I'm going to switch topics here. I see a question here that says, I'd like to know if the FFRF is getting involved with the Mississippi flag issue of having "In God We Trust" on it.
Yes, we are. I mean, we were one of the first groups to weigh in on this, and we're looking at different ways to combat this. This is an area where a lawsuit, I actually mentioned this in the talk, right? I pointed out that courts have said that "In God We Trust" is constitutional because it's so often repeated that it's really difficult to win in court on that issue. So suing over this would be a bad idea. Certainly from a legal standpoint, in terms of winning the case or making good law, you're not going to be successful there. Certainly, you would make a splash, but it would not be a win that would, especially not in Mississippi. It's state court, forget about it. And when you're in federal court, then you're going to go up into the Fifth Circuit, which is one of the most conservative circuits in the country. Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana are part of the Fifth Circuit. So, I mean, it's not a winning case. So we're looking at other ways to push back against this. And one of the things that we've been pushing, and again, if I could sum up my whole talk essentially tonight was about communications, right? Like, we need to better and more effectively communicate why this stuff is important to us. And we have right there, Jocelyn, you said unity was the most appealing message to you. "In God We Trust" is a message of division and disunity. And not just in that it excludes nuns and non-believers, but for Christian nationalists, not Christians, for Christian nationalists, it means something very specific. It means white nationalism, white Christian nationalism. So you're getting rid of the Confederate flag, but you're still adopting this incredibly divisive message by putting "In God We Trust" on the flag.
Can we successfully rebrand it as such? I mean is that possible?
We have data to back it up. It was in a lot of our statements, and I've seen a couple news stories, and we are working on messaging in the state of Mississippi to do this and trying to figure out other things. But if you want to help, that's the way to help, by pointing that out everywhere you can, that they're taking off one very, very divisive message and putting on another divisive message. They're not fixing it.
Satanic Temple's going into Mississippi. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, I think the Satanic Temple has actually talked about what's going on in Mississippi as well. Will that be helpful?
I mean, well, I don't know what they've said. I love TST. I have like a big red button on my desk that, well, at work, not at home here, where I hit it and it'll automatically call Lucian. But the typical TST strategy is to say, okay, you've opened up a forum for religions, so now you have to include the Satanic Temple as part of that. And I'm not sure how they would do that on the flag, other than to say, okay, you're putting God on the flag, you have to put Satan on the flag too, which would certainly be a fun messaging strategy and would, I'm sure, terrify Mississippians. But it's not gonna convince anybody legally. There's no leg to stand on that would say, if you put "In God We Trust" on the flag, you have to put a TST message on the flag too. That's not gonna, no court or politician is gonna buy that, I wouldn't think.
Right. I just saw that somebody's the screen changed a little bit, David. So I'm going to go with another question here. They're asked, this is going to be kind of a softball, but we'll go with it. I've heard separation between religion and government. I've always heard the idiom separation of church and state. Why do you say it as state and church?
Because you noticed. That's
okay.
why it lands, and people pay attention to it more. You can ignore the 6 words, but if you flip them, it hits people a little bit more. And so I've trained myself to do that over the decade of working at FFRF, and it does seem to be effective. You certainly lose a lot fewer people as you're speaking, and they tend to focus on the point you're trying to make more. So, especially media.
That makes sense. And you're right. I think it does work when you say it the other way around. People, because I think we fill in as we listen to people. We only listen to about half of it. I know I'm guilty of it. David can tell you. So, and you fill it in. So if you change it up, then somebody's more likely to actually stop and listen to the full sentence. That completely makes sense. Concerning Supreme Court decisions, what's coming up? And in your opinion, potentially what Supreme Court decision or national event will put us at no turning back in terms of the separation of state and church, or have we already gone there?
We haven't gotten there. I mean, the Espinoza decision is awful and nightmarish, and it's going to do massive damage. But I mean, there's never really a point of no return. One of the best examples is in 1940, the Supreme Court decided a case called Go Bitus. And they just said that, the government can force kids to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Definitely. Absolutely. They have that power. And if your kid gets beat up, tough. And they changed their mind 3 years later. In 1943, the Supreme Court changed their mind and said, no, of course, kids have a right in the First Amendment to not say the pledge if they want to. And that's the Barnett case. It's the case we still cite to today when Florida school districts try to force kids to say the pledge, which still happens all the time. And any school district in the country, that's the case that we cite to them. The damage that has been done to the judiciary is extensive. I will tell you that tons of progressive groups, tons of liberal groups, tons of state church separation groups are talking feverishly behind the scenes about what can be done if there's a change of administration with all of those judges that have been put into place. There are a number of good solutions that I've heard. I'm sure if things go politically the way that they need to go to make those changes happen, I think they will. I think especially when it comes to the law, there's never a point where you're done, and at least not going the wrong direction, right? And this is the thing, and this is the reason that I have hope still, perhaps more than any other, and that is that we are right. We are right. Not only do we have the Constitution on our side and the text of the Constitution on our side and the meaning of the Constitution on our side and the purpose of the Constitution on our side, we're also right. For all of the reasons that I stated before, they are wrong. They are fighting to privilege a shrinking group of people. And that's not going to fly. We are going to win that back. We're going to win on the In God We Trust issue, on the Under God in the Pledge issue. We're going to win on all of those things eventually. I know it. We are.
In your lifetime?
I do believe that. And we may not win in court. We may not win in court on these. But and I've said this, I think I probably said this in the first time I ever came to Free Flow. It became very clear to me early on, being a lawyer in this movement, fighting for a separation of state and church, fighting for a secular government, that we weren't going to win this in the courts. We were going to win this with demographics. And we are absolutely winning that battle. And that's going to shift everything. And it's going to shift our representative government. I mean, you can look at the numbers, not just in terms of numbers of nuns, but in terms of voters and coalescing as a voter bloc. And the last 8 years have been an amazing shift. I'm really excited to see what 2020 brings for this reason alone. We are, as secular Americans, secular voters, atheists, agnostics, nuns, whatever you call yourself, we are a huge untapped political power. And the moment politicians start to tap us as a political power, we're also going to coalesce more and grow more. It's the snowball going down.
The audio is going in and out. It could be a lot of Saturday night gaming nationwide and a lot of people Zooming. I'm not sure. You're still able to hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask this question because I really wanted to get to this no matter what we did today, which was, what do you want the average person to be doing in their everyday life? If they're here on this call, if they're listening to this video, what should they be doing to really help further the cause?
I mean, there are a couple different things. I always encourage everybody to join the secular groups that speak to them the most. Um, and it's not just the funds that help us, right? We love you to get your membership dues, and we love to get your donations to help us fight these battles. But more importantly, it is joining your voice with ours. So when we're pounding the pavement on Capitol Hill and we're visiting a congressional rep, for instance, and saying, hey, you know, we have 13 people in your district, or 30 people, or 300, or 3,000, it makes a big difference. So it's not just about joining to donate your money, it's about joining your voice with ours so that we have more influence. That's really the main reason that I want people to join FFRF or join CFI or AHA or AA or AU or ACLU. That's why it's important. So join FFRF, join one or all of those groups. And the number two thing that I really think is crucial is, especially now, is getting more involved in local activism and your local groups. It is in a fight where we are talking about not winning in the courts, but winning hearts and minds. That is one of the most important things you can do, especially if providing community for people who are questioning, who are leaving. It really is, I think, absolutely crucial to do. And the final thing that I really suggest, and I've come far on this, to saying, if you can come out of the closet as an atheist or an agnostic, I think you have to do that. I used to say, please do that. But if you can do it safely, if you're not going to lose your job, if you're not going to get kicked out of your home, I think you have a duty to do that. And I think you have a duty to do it because you owe it to the people who can't come out of the closet safely, who would get kicked out of their home or who would lose their job. So those are the three big things that I encourage everybody to do. And the last thing is, you have a voice and you have to use it. That is the only thing you have that matters. Okay. And whether it is voting or calling your representative or emailing your senator, or not harassing, but harassing them on Twitter, the other side would like you to believe that it is hopeless to speak up, that your voice doesn't matter, that your vote doesn't matter. But I can tell you, but it really is the only thing you have that matters. There are people who work in congressional offices. Their only job is to count up contacts for how many people opposed this thing that we were doing, how many people were for it, and give that number to the congressional rep or senator. That's the only thing they do. Of course they care about what you say. They want to get reelected, so it matters. We tend to think of it as they hold this position because they're conservative or they're liberal or whatever. But more often than not, they hold a certain position because they think it's the most politically rewarding position to hold. And that changes as people speak up. And of course, that's not to say that there aren't some principled politicians out there who hold policy positions or issue positions based on principle. But a lot of what they do, they hold because it's the politically popular thing to do. And only by speaking out can you ever change that.
I concur. One of the things we were talking about earlier today was when contacting our representatives, to make sure that we try to make it original and from us. That your car. We had a speaker come who's in office, and he was talking about how if you have a unique message, if you indicate exactly who you are and how you're connected to the district, you will probably get read more thoroughly than if you're using the form letter that comes out. That it's important to really give thought to that as well.
That's absolutely true. And the people whose the job it is to count those things up and to read those things, if you've got a good personal story that explains the issue, that you can speak about from that you were personally affected way, they will tend to copy and paste that into whatever summation document they're bringing. And it oftentimes gets read at higher and higher and higher levels. So yeah, I mean, you should definitely do that if you can. Absolutely.
Good to know. Good to know. It was good advice. What are the, there's a question that was posted. What are the top 5 organizations we should support? If you were going to list the top 5, obviously you have to say the FFRF.
Yeah, FFRF, CFFC, FFRF. We work very closely at the Freedom from Religion Foundation with Americans United for the separation of, or for separation of church and state. I always want to say their name backwards, but then it's actually wrong if I do it that way. ACLU, but they have a very small mission in terms of state church separation, but they do phenomenal work. And then we work very, very closely with Center for Inquiry, American Humanist Association, American Atheists does fantastic work. We work very closely with them, especially on some of the more legislative side and state legislative side. And then there are a ton of great other more niche groups. Black Nonbelievers is a fantastic group. Mandisa Thomas does amazing work there. The Secular Student Alliance is one that I personally love. I donate as much time and money as I can to them. I'll do anything that Kevin Bowling asks anytime. So, I mean, the Secular Coalition for America is an umbrella organization that works to help a number of different groups have a lobbying presence. Camp Quest is another great organization that runs secular summer camps for kids, and especially right now they're kind of hurt and they could use some help. So, I mean, that's certainly not exhaustive, and now I feel bad because
I understand. The point is you should probably find what is most important to you personally and what makes you impassioned and donate money there.
Yes.
Right. I mean, that seems to be, we're trying to get Camp 42 in Florida. I would love people to make sure that happens and that the organization continues. It's I think so vital for the state, but it's hard, particularly now with this summer, which was basically a wash for any summer camp group. Actually, how has COVID treated the FFRF? Have you guys continued to get good donations? I mean, are you still getting people engaged? What's going on?
I mean, we could certainly use more help. We went remote. The legal team went remote very early because I kind of was living a remote life anyway on tour with the Founding Myth. So I was able to take the strategic response team remote very early on as sort of a test run for the rest of the team. Then the whole legal team went remote, then the whole office, and we're still, nobody's there. We reopened the store. So our store personnel go in a couple days a week to handle all the shipping and stuff like that. But, for the most part, the office is empty. Everybody's working remotely still. Obviously donations and membership have taken a hit because the whole country is taking a hit right now. So if you've got the time or the money or the bandwidth, please do join up.
Okay, that's what I figured, but I thought I'd ask because it's we're all kind of adjusting, because I think we're probably looking at almost maybe another year of this. Seems like, based on
seems like a very long time.
It does seem like a long time, particularly if you've got two kids at home.
Yes.
Life is rich and full, as my father would say. I'm going to go back to some of the questions that were given to me earlier. How much religious influence do you think our military presence in the world actually has? I mean, you kind of touched on that lightly, and I think that's what created that. And the person went on to say, I always was told war is because of 3 things: religion, power, or money.
I mean, that'd probably be a hard thing to argue against, just because those are 3 very broad topics. I mean, they're kind of, I'm not entirely sure what the question is asking, whether or not it's asking about the presence of Christianity in the military.
I think that's the question. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
now that I reread it. Yeah.
It's pretty alarming. I'll say that. It's hard to know the breadth and depth of Christian nationalism in the military, but it's certainly alarming. And we at FFRF have a real hard time challenging these violations. For instance, because once the military gets wind of them, first of all, it's an opaque system, and it's meant to be an opaque system for outsiders. And the second thing is that when you catch wind of a violation and write a letter to try to correct it, the next time you're corresponding, you're dealing with entirely different people, and they shift people around all the time. So getting any type of continuity and trying to address a violation is very, very difficult. And just the nature of the beast makes it hard for an outsider to come in and say, hey, you got to stop doing this, what you're doing is wrong. They don't take kindly to that. But we've had instances where we're about to file a lawsuit, and plaintiff will all of a sudden inexplicably get transferred to a new place where the thing that we're going to challenge is not happening. So now we don't have a plaintiff who has an injury, who has standing, so we can't bring a lawsuit. We've had that happen quite a few times. And it makes it hard to cure those, but it is an area that we care deeply about. A quarter of FFRF's membership are active duty or veterans.
Oh, wow.
So it's an area we do an extensive amount of work on. Yeah.
I think there was work to bring in a humanist chaplain into the military, correct? And that was unsuccessful, if I remember correctly.
It's been going on for 7 years now, and still unsuccessful. Yes.
And it just refresh me, and why would they not allow a humanist chaplain? It doesn't make sense. If you're going to let the others in, why not? I mean, what's the harm, really?
I mean, the answers to that there are no good answers to that. There's no good reason for keeping a humanist chaplain out, especially when you look at the demographics. People, I mean, the people who are in the military, especially you're talking, people who are just signing up, almost everybody's under 25, right? And that demographic is very much non-religious, especially compared to the rest of the population. I mean, you're talking about probably 40% that are not religious or thereabouts. So the idea that they don't have anybody to help service their mental and emotional health, I mean, to me, that's a dereliction of duty on the part of the command.
Andrew, do you want to give any final notes here to close us down?
I mean, I think the thing that I was trying to really push home is, and I mean, this could sum up the whole talk, really. You have a voice and you have to use it. And sitting by, and even if you're online reading a news story, in a side or a one sentence that talks about Christian privilege in a way that you don't like, or Christian nationalism in a way that's not true, or the separation of state and church in a way that's not true, stand up against that. You have a voice and you have to use it. And again, the other side wants to convince you that your voice doesn't matter, and they want to convince you of that because it's the only thing you have that does matter. So keep on doing the work that you're doing, and please support FFRF and CFFC. And if FFRF can help you, get a copy of the book if you want much better arguments against Christian nationalism. Please do that. And if you read that book and liked it, please go leave a review somewhere. Much appreciate that too.
All right, everybody has some homework. I'll be expecting to see that in the next week or so.
If you didn't like it, don't leave a review.
No, we'll tell you where you can go with that. All right, thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you. We truly appreciate having you come and share your wisdom with us today. And I like your new 5-point plan. I like it. Okay. Let's do it. We need bumper stickers.
All right, let's do it. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. Bye.
All right, so I want to give a final thank you to all of our co-hosting organizations, the Florida Humanist Association, Free Flow, the Free Thought Florida Conference, the First Coast Free Thought Society in the Jacksonville area, Humanists of the West Florida and the Pensacola area, the Satanic Temple Central Florida chapter, Atheists of Florida, primarily in Tampa, Suncoast Skeptics in Sarasota, Bradenton, Venice, Tallahassee Atheists, the Humanists of Tallahassee, the Atheist Community of Polk County, the Humanist Community of the Space Coast, and FLASH, the Florida Atheists and Secular Humanists, which is across several counties in South Florida. If you've joined us today in Florida and you're not part of a local group that has an interest in the separation of religion and government, then you should be finding a group to join. You can find more information at tinyurl/FL Freethought. Again, that's tinyurl.com/FLFreethought. There are dozens of groups across the state, so find one near you. And thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful Saturday.